Alrighty, so today I have a short, chill, fun one for you, partially because tomorrow you will also be getting a nice preview card on this channel. So today I just wanted to do a smaller video. This is going to be my first kind of brew video for set 3. I'm going to be showing off a little Dooku deck that I've been just messing around with, just in theory crafting. Of course, this is way too early, but we do have about half the set revealed at this point, so I thought it'd be an interesting time to kind of like start messing around. Of course, I'm going to be starting a lot more brews in the coming weeks. I'll be featuring a lot of them on my Patreon, so if you want to check those out, click that link in the description below. Of course, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and let's get to it. So this is Way Too Early Dooku. My first instinct is to pair him with blue. I don't think that's too weird for me, considering green-blue is often an archetype that I think is very good. On top of that, there's a lot of blue separatists in this set or in previous sets, so I think they just pair pretty well with Dooku's ability. So what are we trying to do here? At first glance, this is kind of all in on fodder and payoffs. When I start a brew, I want to really tap into the leader's ability, try to see how greedy I can get with it and how easy it is to enable it, and then from there kind of pull back, start including more interaction, more things that will kind of like tune the deck. But for right now, I want to just get a lot of fodder, and then I want to be exploiting a lot, using Dooku's ability a lot, and see what kind of shenanigans we can get to. So at the top there, we're going to see our early plays. One of them is old, Patrolling V-Wing, which although does not leave behind a body when it dies, it does give you a card. So I think it's going to be a pretty good fodder unit for anything exploit related. It's sort of like giving you that 2 cost, that draw for free, because that 2 cost that you spent on the V-Wing will then be used to reduce another card by 2 cost. And then we've got 9 2-drops that are all new. Rune Hako, I think it's just going to be one of the best 2-drops in this color in general. It's a 3/2. It is also a separatist, so with Dooku, you could make it cost 0 if you exploit it out. Has that really relevant when played effect that when something dies, it gives something -1/-1. So I think that's kind of a no-brainer in most blue villain decks. It certainly has some extra synergy here with the separatist and the when played ability. So I think it's going to be a solid early play. And then kind of the real bangers here for the first turn of the game are the Wartime Trade Official and the Confederate Courier. They are both little guys that don't really do much, but they both die into a droid. So they enable exploit pretty easily. If your opponent removes one of them, for instance, to try to shut down your exploit, it doesn't really do anything, right? Because you still get a unit to exploit the following turn. And then if you exploit themselves, then you still get like more fodder for future turns. So I think those are going to be, or at least for now, look like pretty core in terms of like really trying to exploit the exploit mechanic, right? You want your units to chain into more units, but you also don't want to like give up all your board. All right, I'm gonna skip down to the 1 5-drop separatist we have here, which is Kraken. I think it's a very important number for the set, for the Dooku deck, just because you can play a 2-drop and then exploit a 5-drop, make it cost 3 if it's a separatist. And I think Kraken does this particularly well with Dooku, because it just gives you more units when you play, right? He makes 2 droids, so you play you're patrolling V-Wing turn 1, you exploit out a Kraken, you've now got a 2/5, 2 1/1s, and you're kind of ready to rumble for the next turn as well. You've got food for your next exploit. Himself is a 2/5, which means there's a good chance you might even be able to get an attack off and then pump the droids. So I think Kraken, and we're going to definitely look for future 5-drop separatists. I think that's going to be a pretty important number. Now, I don't expect we'll get too much, because I think in development, I'd assume that if they made a really completely broken 5-drop separatist that like you could play on turn 2, that it would probably have gotten tweaked in some way. But we may get another, and it'd be nice to see if we can squeeze in another 5-drop there. Now for the 3s, we got Super Laser Tech. I mean, come on, it's not a separatist, but it's also a very good fodder unit. You can play the tech and then exploit it out. You immediately get an untapped resource, and then you get a ramp, right? Super laser tech's gotta be in here, right? We got a bunch of new 3-drops though, right? This deck is a lot of cards from Twilight of the Republic. It may not end up that way, but got a lot to like here. We got Calculating Magna Guard. It's a 3/4 that when played can give itself Sentinel, and then of course when something dies. So it's a solid card to play on turn 2 against aggressive decks. Grievous is just a 4/4 with blank text, but of course that is a very good stat line, and he also can come out costing 1 if you need him to. The Commando there is a 4/3 that has ambush if you have another separatist unit. Not going to be too hard to make him have ambush on turn 2, which is really good for clearing the way. It's a pretty cheap 4 damage ambush, so I think in a lot of cases that's going to be decent, especially if people are playing a lot of 2/3s or a lot of like token decks, right? It's going to come in, it's going to kill something, it's going to survive. And then we've got the cohort, which, you know, I don't think the power level on this is that high, but I really want to just try again to get these synergies going. So it's a 1/1 that makes a 1/1 and then also dies into a 1/1. So of course this is all about maintaining your droids and keeping the chain going. We got a little bit of interaction. We got 3 Power of the Dark Side. Still think that card is really good. I don't expect it to just be awful just because people are trying to go a little wider. We got 3 Fell of the Dragons. I think the deck may have enough board presence to deal with like earlier threats, but maybe big things, at least currently, I find big things being a bigger problem for blue-green villain decks. So I'd opt early for Fell the Dragon. And of course, all this removal is subject to change. Barrage, you know, it's very good. It's also going to be very good at kind of clearing other exploit boards or like coordinate boards. And then I stuck in 1 Rivals Fall. Okay, now for kind of the big payoff. So Dooku, I think this is a big riser in the set, especially with Count Dooku Leader. He is a separatist, so Count Dooku can make Count Dooku cost 5. Now that is a very powerful 5 cost play to play a 5/4 shielded that kills something that has 4 or less health. I think Dooku, you know, maybe it should be 3 here and Vader should be 2, but for now I think this is kind of how I messed with it. But I think Dooku is going to be a very exciting 7-drop to play here. Vader, you know, it has no synergy here specifically. It does not have separatist. It cannot be made to cost less. But we just talked about all those 3-drops, and they are kind of absurd. And Vader is getting a major boost with these 3-drops that he can pull out of your deck, right? He can get a Magna Guard, which means a 3/4 Sentinel. He can get a 4/4, which is Grievous. He could potentially get a 4/3 Ambush to come out of him as long as you have like a battle droid sitting around. Of course, you can bring out super laser techs. You can bring out the cohort if you just want to be able to go even wider. And then even Rune Hako seems to be a very good Vader pull. I think Vader, even though it doesn't have direct synergy here, is just kind of a nuts card, and it's going to get even better. Invisible Hand. I'm excited to try this out. It is separatist, which means it can cost 6. It's making a ton of little guys. We like little guys. It means we can keep the chain going. As always, that's kind of the theme here. It is an awkward stat line for your opponent to deal with. Being 4 power means it doesn't get hit by things like Fell of the Dragon. 7 health means, you know, takedown doesn't hit it. It is just positioned pretty well. Of course, it can come in and actually like do a ton of damage. It can hit for 8 theoretically the next turn if you just exhaust all the droids that it played. So it will be able to close out games and then also enable further like big things to come out. We got a couple Malevolence here. Now this can cost down to 1. It's actually like with a curve of like Confederate Courier into Kraken, you can actually play a Malevolence on turn 3, which can be incredibly powerful unless you're playing into like decks with Waylay or, you know, hard removal. But as in certain situations, I think being able to play a very early Malevolence will be quite powerful. The card itself seems pretty decent. We'll see if it ends up making the final cuts here, right? Because it's only going to be the best of the best at the top end that's going to be good enough, but right now we're trying a few different ones. And lastly, we got Gore. He can also be made to cost less, right? He can cost 6. Of course, he can cost even less if you use Dooku's ability to make his exploit bigger. But he really is kind of a finisher and a stabilizer at the same time. Of course, he eats basically your whole board, so it does kind of put all your eggs in one basket there. But that's kind of how this deck is constructed, right? We got the early game to enable the exploit. We want to make that a main facet of this deck that we can keep exploiting over and over again. It doesn't always have to be for a big thing, right? These exploit cards can exploit into like a Grievous plus another card, right? Turn 1, Wartime Official, exploit it, play a Grievous. You still have resources left, right? Grievous only cost 1 that turn, so you can play another 2-drop like a Rune Hako or something. It allows you to play 2 cards in 1 turn, or it lets you do the big thing. And that's where we are. Now, Dooku himself is such a powerhouse when he flips. He's a 5/9 overwhelm. So we're not trying, like, I think we're trying to win earlier than like we would with bigger control decks that were like doing Avenger Devastator stuff, right? We want to go wide enough to not get completely obliterated by like one-shot removal, and then we want to be able to play Dooku and then push damage in those turns with like that mid-late game, not the like we're milling you out late game or wanting to like start messing with Avengers, because of course Avengers can't be made cheaper in this deck. There's a chance that Avenger still ends up here, right? Because it's such a good card. But for now, we're really digging into the Dooku synergy. We're really playing a lot of new cards from the new set, just to see how good it is, and then we always tweak. All right, I got some more stuff here. So these are other things I'm looking at or have been looking at. Of course, there's way more. These are like the either staples that I think may very well end up in the deck, or really like niche stuff. But, you know, like Vanguard Infantry is another decent unit to like exploit out. You play him, and then whatever you exploit him into then also gets an experience, which is a pretty nice play. You know, Top Target, it's just here because it's obviously very good as like a sideboard card. Timely Intervention, I think, works really well with some exploit cards because you're making them cheaper, and then Timely Intervention can give them ambush. You know, some like Gore already has ambush, but like in ambushing Malevolence, you can do Timely and Malevolence. That if you exploited 4, that's a 2-cost play, and Malevolence attacks for 7, restores 2, right? It's interesting stuff with there. Emperor's Legion, right? We're eating all our own units, then you buy them all back. Decent synergy. Admiral Mahdi, another one that like you can exploit something big, like a Dooku, for instance, a 7-cost Dooku, exploit off the Mahdi, ready the Dooku. Seems like there's some play there. Resupply, you know, don't need to say much there. There's the wing leader here, the 3/4 ship. It is a separatist. This seems to be more like aggro driven just because of its ability, but of course it's a 3/4 for 3, which you can play for 1 cost if you exploit. So I think there's a very good chance that we would just want that card. Takedown, you know, it's good. Long Pike, just a good card, no synergy. You got this 4/4 here, the separatist, that when it gets attacked, he makes a droid. Potentially decent. I think at 4 costs it's a little weird because on turn 2, if you exploit him out, you're kind of left with 1 resource, which is not usually enough to do. It's why I much prefer finding a 5-drop. But an early 4/4 that gets attacked into a droid seems decent. Palpatine's Return's a good sideboard card, or sometimes main deck. Kalani's another very interesting separatist. I was this close to just putting it in the deck already. I don't think the card is very good outside of playing him with Dooku, but because Dooku can make that guy cost 4, he is just like a 4-cost 5/7. I think like the text on it is upside, but it's like mostly not the thing I'm interested in. I think 4-cost 5/7 is just like a pretty interesting stat line. It's just so big that it's got to be good, right? So, you know, very good chance by the end of this video, I'm just going to move that into the main deck somehow. Consolidation of Power. I want to play around with this card at some point. I don't know if this will be the deck for it because all these droids and like low cost things don't give much power for the consolidation. But of course, There is some combo potential there, but you know, we're already all at top end mostly already has exploit, and this seems to be like something you want to do to exploit out like a Devastator, not so much things that can already be made cheaper. Maul, good card. Choose sides, I think is going to be an interesting card here, especially because we're going to have a lot of fodder units. I think having this is like a potential out to like people doing bigger things than us, like Avenger, Devastator, or Luke Skywalkers, right? So this will give the deck, instead of like just playing a bunch of removal for those things, we can play choose sides, and then we all our units like die into more units. We should be able to do something pretty fun with choose sides in a lot of situations. Snoke, no synergy here specifically, just a solid card. We talked about all the big ships: Avenger, Relentless, Devastator, Finalizer. I mean, Finalizer might actually be more interesting here because, again, we're going to have hopefully a decent amount of fodder units, so Finalizer might just be able to kind of like clean up a board. It's still likely not going to be as good as the other ships, but there's a chance. And then lastly, Invasion of Christophsis. Ugh, don't know if I pronounce that correctly. Anyway, it's a one-sided board wipe. It can cost down to 7. I think, well, I'll definitely try this in this deck at some point. At first, I just wanted to be a little more proactive with like trying to finish the game as opposed to reactive with like board control. But certainly this can be quite powerful if we are able to maintain a board presence. All right, that was a short one. Hope you liked it. This deck's going to change within an hour or two, or a day or two, or with every new card reveal. But I wanted to get something out early and get those wheels grinding. Think about Dooku. I think he's going to be really interesting to build around. It's not going to have to be blue. It's just the first stop I had. Of course, if you want more brews or just decks for me in general, Patreon is where you'll find those very soon. There will be a whole collection there with set 3 pre-testing, right, before the whole set is revealed. So some exciting stuff coming there. All right, stay tuned for tomorrow. There'll be a nice preview card, and until then, take care.